we go. Okay, 3. Okay.
What do you think of when you think of the word sensational? Perhaps you think of a well put together film, or a great play by your favorite athlete, or a great play in a sports game you saw over the weekend. Maybe you even think it's the food you just had at your restaurant. Regardless, when people use the word sensational, they think of an adjective used to describe something that was amazing or unbelievable. In journalism, sensationalism is a noun that's defined as the use of exciting or shocking stories or language to expose something regardless of accuracy to promote public interest or excitement. This is dated back for over a century, beginning with the Spanish-American War coverage. William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer, acclaimed journalists, competed for headlines regarding stories in Cuba. They used romance, tragedy, and exaggeration to evoke emotions and sell papers. Hearst instructed his reporters in Cuba to write on the appalling circumstances of people in Cuba. His goal, he said, was to tug at the heartstrings of Americans. Stories of female prisoners, executions, valiant rebels fighting, and starving women and children were among some of his, quote, best stories. The sinking of the U.S. Maine was really what escalated things, however. The Hearst newspapers, with no evidence whatsoever, blamed the entire incident on the Spanish. This soon demanded public intervention from the United States in the war. Historians today now call the Spanish-American War, quote, the first press-driven war. While the press may not have directly caused the war, they certainly had a great influence because of the piqued interest level of the American people after Pulitzer and Hearst published their articles. Now, media bias and journalistic sensationalism is personal, not only for me, but should be for our country as a whole, because what we read, see, and listen to shapes many of our ideologies. Even things as simple as Twitter and Facebook and the news and what you like to watch on TV can be skewed or sensationalized just to sell or entertain. Everything that makes up the media, print journalism, television, social media, radio, blogs, anything you see on the internet, and so on, hand select the stories that they want people to see, and then subsequently shape those stories in the direction that they wish to promote. According to a recent blogaboutnews.com article, Jon Stewart blasted sensationalism in the media, saying that the mainstream media is more towards sensationalism, conflict, and laziness than it is accuracy. It's too bad that we've trended towards this way. Media sensationalism is present in almost everything we consume in America. By using the Constitution to defend their efforts, journalists often get away with reporting information that is either A, not factual, or B, not relevant, and advances their agendas more than the truth. The truth may not sell papers or provide high TV ratings, but it is what we as a people need. It's too bad because I don't feel that the media used to always be this way. We were not always subjected to sensationalism and persuasion. The news used to be the news. Today it seems much more manufactured. When you flip on the 5 o'clock news today, you ever notice that the TV anchors don't talk about a certain issue for more than a minute or a minute and a half? This is because they're not really knowledgeable about the issue. They're briefed on what happened beforehand, and then they use facial expressions to show emotion and evoke emotion out of people, when really they're just doing that for their TV ratings. Information theorist Dave Starker has an interesting take on this. He says that there are 4 controversial maxims when it comes to journalism, and that a persuasive person deliberately breaking one of the 4 controversial maxims is guilty of committing journalistic sensationalism. The first maxim is quantity. He states that information that is complete and full is the right way to approach journalism. This is the most common strategy we see when journalists skew this, not giving us the full story, reporting what they want us to read and only that. The second, and I think this is probably the most common, is the quality. His maxim states that information is truthful and accurate. The examples of this in the media would be skewed statistics or paraphrasing. In advertising, we see this a lot. Have you ever seen ads that read something like this? 80% of dentists recommend Colgate White. Well, it turns out, according to recent studies, that dentists actually recommend a lot of other brands too, at that high percentage, and this ad was banned by the Advanced Standards Association. There's also too good to be true ads. In 2009 and 2010, Reebok made the claim that easy tone and run tone shoes will work your hamstrings, quote, 11% harder and tone your glutes 28% more than the regular shoe. Reebok just recently had to pay a $5 million settlement, and this exercise headline was banned. That brings me to my next main point, which is networks and publications that report on Hollywood, what we see a lot, attempt to make stories come alive through big headlines and scandalous stories. They want to make people think about things they otherwise would not, to sell copies, ratings, and subscriptions. Most of it has no relevance or importance to our lives or society. Some of these publications you might see would be People Magazine, Variety Magazine, OK Magazine, and on TV, E! News. It's also important that we understand that some of the television shows that are on TV are also just sensational dramas meant to up TV users and subscriptions. For example, The Bachelor and The Bachelorette give a skewed perception of what relationships are. It's a fantasy land because you have a guy or a girl contestant picking out a handful of other guys or girls in a short period of time, and they can go on multiple dates, and then they're supposed to pick that person to marry. And usually it doesn't work out. Dave Starker has another theory called the conversion theory. It states that a minority in a group can have a disproportionate effect on influencing those in the majority. This can be true in media too, with things that are important and things that are lighthearted. For example, a couple of years ago, we saw the Harlem Shake take over media, social media all over the country. Sports teams were doing it, everyone was doing it. And this is just a lighthearted trend that didn't last long, but it just goes to show something that small can really take over the media in the country for a period of time. Then there's things that are really good for social media. For example, the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, where people are challenged to dump water on their head and donate a small amount of money for ALS research. And that's something that's great that it gets all over the media because it's a trend that supports a good cause and is good for society and helpful. And there's also people who advance their movement and litigation by marching on Capitol Hill and things like that. And the media also has a lot of coverage of that because they like to get small minority groups big in the news, and they know that that's what will keep people reading and sell subscriptions. The media is bad on all sides, though. Regardless of biases or which side you're on, the press will go with whatever appeals to the public and makes them interested in something. For example, every day in the Kansas City Star, the horoscopes are published. And these horoscopes really don't go off any factual information, but we all know our horoscopes according to our birthday, and people read them, and they start their day off with that, and they go off them, and they read them, and obviously they're published every day, so something's working with them, and they're popular. To the newspapers, that's really all that matters. All media really has declined, though, and since there's no middle ground anymore, we're subject to people, shows, and news sources that really aren't compromising anymore. They're just going for ratings and entertainment value. Personally, it's disappointing because the media has sort of been this way my whole life. History has shown politics, sports, and news and other things have not always been covered this way. It's a lot more deceptive now than it used to be. In conclusion, we as an American people need to not only be aware, but cautious as it pertains to the media. Freedom of press, our First Amendment right, is sometimes being manipulated for the use of a good story and can cost citizens access to pertinent news, events, and facts. Without even realizing it, we often shape our opinions, ideas, events, policies, and what we think of people based on what we read in the paper, social media, or through other mediums. This issue goes deeper than taking one side or another. It's systemic. It's how newspapers, television stations, radio, and the internet cover news. We must revise how mass communication is taught and revive bipartisan, wholesome, truthful journalism and media coverage. Because it is important that we as a people demand more. Instead of seeing big headlines like this that read Ebola and exclamation points when we know Ebola is not a huge issue in America, or this exercise promotional that says 2-minute exercises will stop your aging. We need to see more thought out journalism that really pursues the news. It shows that the journalists have an interest in what they're covering and they're not just going after headlines. We deserve better as a people. When taking in the news, it is important to take everything we read now with a grain of salt. Whether it be an opinion piece on LeBron James' legacy, a People magazine cover story on Selena Gomez, or the seriousness, or lack thereof in my opinion, of Ebola in America, the press is pushing their story for the sake of success, for their publication, and for themselves. And all I'm asking for is that you're aware of that. Thank you.
Sure.